Buongiorno.
I don't know how to say hey. Isn't that how you say hi in Swedish? It's H-E-J.
Well, that's what they always say at IKEA.
Yeah, that's why I know it.
Must be true. Sorry for the European pronunciation, but the IKEA, not IKEA.
Okay.
Today, we talk about...
Oggi parliamo.
I'm
doing the subtitles.
Okay. I'll go to Swedish, you go to Italian. We're going to talk about four cars that are actually the same car that most people, I don't think, realize are even remotely related.
Is that so? I always have known. I just don't know whether most people know or care. It may predate.
Almost every true dyed-in-the-wool car person I talked to had no idea in preparation for the episode that we're talking about. We're talking about a Revelations episode that just should have launched last week. I hope it did. Had no clue that the Alfa Romeo 164 was the Saab 9000, which also then was the Lancia Thema and the Fiat Croma.
Really? I'm surprised that is esoteric knowledge, but I live in esoteric.
Esoteria?
Yes.
Is it the land of
population
esoteria?
So, okay.
Yeah. Did a Revelation stuff. We're going to talk about those cars. Ignore the thing in the background. It's Honda. We do talk about Honda, although we didn't mean to.
Yes, and certainly not this one.
Definitely not this one. Just ignore that. Because sadly, I had to give back the Tipo Quattro cars, which are the aforementioned quadruplets separated at birth. And so let's hop to it.
Okay, that's Jason Cammisa. I'm Derek Tam-Scott. This is the Carmudgeon Show, part of the Haggerty Podcast Network. Now I will make an attempt to clap. That one was extra poor. That one was also bad.
From a D- to a D+.
Jason will now clap. That one was also shit.
Jake, help. Something's wrong. I can't. I'm missing. It doesn't work. Right.
4.
5.
4.
Uno.
Nope. 4.
You know what the original Tipo car was?
Was it the Fiat Croma?
It was Tipo Zero. So the Tipo Quattro platform is actually very imaginatively named. There was Tipo Zero, which was Fiat's first ground-up new platform. And then there was Tipo Uno, Tipo Dua, Tipo Tre, e Tipo Quattro.
Were those all sequentially to replace
existing shit?
So were they different sized cars, or were they different iterations of the same car?
Maybe.
Okay.
And I say that knowing that I have that information in my notes document from the Revelations episode that I could pull up. If I can reach my phone. Oh, hold on. I can reach my phone. So, so basically...
What year is this happening?
I don't know these questions. Oh, we're supposed to be doing an intelligent thing about Tipo Quattro. So the whole Tipo Quattro thing happened because Lancia needed a new full-size car. And
what was it replacing?
You know the Lancia ancient history. My Lancia knowledge.
Gamma? Okay. Probably.
I don't know. Some large car. Okay.
Probably
so
the Gamma.
The year was 1978. That I can tell you. Okay. So Tipo Zero became the Fiat Panda. Tipo Uno became the Fiat Uno.
Who could have seen that coming?
Get this. The Tipo Dua became the Fiat Tipo. So they used Tipo. Tipo Tre became the Fiat Tempra and Lancia Dedra.
Okay.
And the Tipo Quattro became the Fiat Croma, Lancia Thema, Saab 9000, and Alfa Romeo 164.
But not in that order.
No, correct. In the order was actually Saab 9000, Lancia Thema, Fiat Croma, and then Alfa Romeo.
In terms of introduction, not the inception of the development.
So 1978, Lancia needs a full-size platform. Fiat had purchased...
This is probably a Gamma replacement, if I had to guess.
I don't know. I mean, you've showed me Flaminias with extra wipers in the back.
No, this is from this is a
50s
generation.
60s,
yeah.
But that's literally all I know about Lancias. I haven't done, when I do a Revelations on like 50s and 60s Lancias, then I'll tell you.
Okay.
70s. So the year is 69 or 68 Fiat purchases
69.
Lancia. 69. So it's about a decade later. Lancia needs a new car. They don't have the money to develop everything. Of course, they're in financial ruin because Lancia. Volvo and Saab almost merge. I think it was more of a Volvo takeover of Saab that failed. Saab is like, shit. So Saab had only ever made one car, and then the 99 was their only other second car. And at this point,
which was a replacement.
Which was a replacement for that first car. And
this became the 900.
Right. Well, in 1978, they needed to do something to make an all-new car, and the merger fell through with Volvo. So their emergency thing was, re-engineer the 99 to pass future rollover tests and crash tests. And that became the 900. Mm-hmm. So now they have that, but they really wanted a larger car.
It's a heavy redo of the 99.
It is a 99 with a lengthened front end is all it was. I mean, the hatches are swappable between the two cars. So Saab has no money, no ability to build a car. And one way, I don't remember how it happened, but one way or another, they wound up in talks with Lancia, and they both wanted a full-size family sedan.
You know what else they both wanted?
To survive?
To sell the Delta in Sweden.
Yes.
Which led to the Swedish market only Saab Lancia 600 GLS and other variants.
Yeah, this is something that didn't make it into the Revelations episode because just for time. But I love that you can buy a Lancia Delta, i.e. the car that became the Integrale, the four-wheel drive version of it.
Yeah, the hot version became the Integrale. There were many non-hot versions of the Delta.
Yeah, but badged as a Saab.
Yes.
I think that's so cool.
The Saab 600.
There was they did another project. There was another car that they co-branded, whatever. So they were in bed together. And Fiat's plan was...
I do not want a normal car
department.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, who are the two weirdest car companies in the world in 1978? I mean, Citroën had to be up there. But
yes, you could buy the CX and the GS.
But otherwise, I mean, the three weirdest.
Every country has a weirdo, right? Italy's weirdo is the Lancia. Saab is definitely weirdo. They were getting less weird, but they were still quite weird at that point.
What about, does America have a weird car company? Tucker.
Yeah, but during this period, it would be like the remains of AMC.
That's true. Yeah, the Eagle was pretty weird.
Yeah. And the Concorde, AMC Concorde, which is the trunk version of the non-wagon version.
Which is the one that became the Renault Alliance, which was actually a Chrysler. No.
You're thinking
I'm sorry,
of
the Chrysler was the Dodge Monaco.
Okay.
All of those cars were Renault. All the Chrysler cars that are actually Renault, if you open the hood and it's got a longitudinal front-wheel drive car, then it's a Renault.
Yes.
So that even went to the 300M, was still based on...
The remains of what had been the Renault 25, I think it was.
I don't even remember. The Alliance. Anyway, so yeah, the weirdo Lancia from Italy and the weirdo Saab they sign memorandum of understanding, and I think it was October of 1978. They're going to work together on a new car. Fiat Group says, fine, we'll take one. And they decide they'll market this full-size family sedan as the Croma. Lancia will market theirs as the Thema. If you ever hear anyone call it the Thema, punch them.
Just like if you hear anybody call it a Lancia.
Or an Audi.
Then you punch
Porsche.
them.
Yeah. A lot of punching going on. Sorry, guys.
Well, just learn to speak the language or pronounce the name in the language from which it originates.
Somebody made a comment on one of the previous podcasts, like, as a European, I want to punch myself for the pronunciation that you two do on some. I don't know what it was.
Someone objected to coupe and also Jaguar.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, we're usually pretty good at the pronunciation, though. I was kind of surprised to hear.
Well, these are words that we have an alternate pronunciation for in English. They are English words. They have entered the English dictionary. Yeah. Coupe, right? It is pronounced coupe. It's a recognized pronunciation in English in the same way that Jaguar is a recognized pronunciation in English in America for both.
Well, yeah, you don't look at the cat type thing and say that's a Jaguar. I mean,
as Americans, we don't.
Jaguar.
Yes, but we also say, I mean, it's just regionalized, just like we say schedule in America. Yeah. But these are the words in this language, right, as opposed to foreign words.
So if you object to our pronunciation, go fly your schedule. Sure. An alternate pronunciation for kite. Go fly your kite. Anyway, Lancia and Saab joined forces. They decided to make the car. Fiat makes its own. And there's a great, I found during the process of research, I found a great interview with a Saab.
High level, these end up as sort of heavily badge engineered versions of the same car.
We will have said that in the intro, but the big surprise is that we have four cars technically, having nothing to do with the name Tipo Quattro. The Quattro has nothing to do with four cars that are badge engineered, but have very different personalities. But so Saab tends to, first of all, the Italian labor unions kicked Saab out of the development process. This I love. So I found a bunch of interviews. Saab people are like, yeah, well, we signed a memorandum of understanding that we're going to jointly develop this platform. And then they kicked us out and then made a bunch of decisions at trattorias at night, trattoria, if we're fucking up pronunciations, and that we had no say in it. And they just gave us the final product and like, here's your car. And the styling of the Tipo Quattro cars was done by Giugiaro.
All of them?
Yes.
All of them?
Except the Alfa Romeo.
Okay.
We're not there. We're not to Alfa yet. So the three original, the Croma, the Thema, and the 9000, Giugiaro did and then handed them over to the car companies and allowed them to tweak and finalize the design, but then had to give it back to Giugiaro for sign-off. That I think is pretty cool.
Okay. He had also done work for them elsewhere in the Fiat Saab Lancia group.
Like?
The Delta.
Yes. That's it?
Oh, well, I was just thinking in common ground between Lancia and Saab.
And also, by the way, if you hear anyone ever pronounce his last name as Giugiaro, punch him.
Don't just punch them.
Giorgetto Guigiario. I've heard it all. Anyway, so Giugiaro designs these cars, hands it over to them, and then I read this great interview in Swedish. Thank you, Google Translate. Saab's head of safety attended the first crash test, and it was all the Lancia guys, and because Fiat really has nothing to do with this. It was genuinely Lancia plus, then Saab came in. And his quote was that the Lancia guys were squealing with joy after the crash test, and while all the Swedes were holding their heads in horror because the passenger cell completely collapsed.
And so the Italians were judging it by some other standard.
It didn't blow up.
Okay.
Like it literally didn't
shatter
into 2 tons of rust. I thought that was so funny. So basically, they hand them this car, and the Swedes are like, fuck, we're gonna have to re-engineer the whole front end, which they did. And still beat the Lancia to market.
If you want to understand how Italy works, there you go.
Yeah, there you have it. They gave them a finalized product. Italy gives Sweden a finished product. Sweden unfinishes it, refinishes it, and launches it before Italy can get
the original one.
And so the big difference between the Fiat Croma and then Lancia Thema, the Thema came a couple of months after the Saab 9000, and then the Croma came 8 months, I think, after that. But in the hierarchy, think of the Fiat as the Chevy version and the Lancia as the Cadillac version, right? Cadillac. So the Fiat started with like a 1.6, was I believe the smallest engine of the bunch, and then topped out at a 2-liter, which then was the bottom motor in the Lancia. So the Lancia sort of picked up in equipment level and power where the Fiat left off. Otherwise, the same car, just different front end treatment.
I think that's more differentiation than you'd get it within GM. I feel like you'd get more powertrain overlap in GM.
Yeah, because you could get a Cavalier V6 and you could get a 4-cylinder Cimarron. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there were like 3100, if you're talking Berettas or whatever era of car you're talking about, there you could usually get a big motor in the Chevy. They would just put a Z in front of it and give it Euro look grille and alloy wheels and a red stripe, and then say it was sporty.
Yeah, and then put a Euro badge on it.
Yes, the Euro Lumina.
Oh my God.
So they made more of a concerted effort to differentiate and stratify
ish. I mean, I don't think the body panels were different.
Yeah, but like the engines and stuff.
Yeah, and equipment level. There's a lot of stuff that, like, the Lancia had Servotronic, which is Bosch's variable assist power steering, like speed-sensitive power steering. Lancia had a bunch of stuff, optional ABS. I think it was the first Italian car with ABS. It was not available on the Croma. Croma was initially 4-cylinder only, and you can get a V6 in the Lancia, and I love this.
Could you ever get a Croma that had more than 4 cylinders?
No, Croma was 4 cylinders.
Always 4 cylinders.
Yeah. Thema, you could get a PRV V6. So the Peugeot Renault Volvo 2.8 liter 2849cc 90-degree V6 that was in the Peugeot 505 and the Renault
610, A610.
A610, but also the later 25 and 75, and then, or I guess not 25, 75, and then the 25.
I bet it was in the 25.
Yeah. And then that was in Volvo 960 GLE had that motor, and the DeLorean, of course.
And the 262.
262 had that car. Yeah, that motor too.
I think.
But it was, when I was doing research, I realized it was the only European V6 in production at the time.
It was also in the 504 coupe.
Am I wrong about this being the only European V6? Because didn't Ford have?
Cologne?
Ford, that dated to the 1960s.
Yeah, they had the Cologne V6. Well, it's not, it's
kind
of European. Maybe it's not European. You need to call the editor.
Hold on, excuse me. Why my phone is going haywire. Remind me today at 6 p.m. to call Rob to unfuck the fuck up about the V6 in production.
Getting to see the sausage be made.
I've added that.
Thank
For
you.
this evening at 6 p.m. Of course.
Shit. Yeah, I did my research and there was no other European V6, but I bet that search excluded
what year?
Ford. This would have been 1982.
That's also right around the time the Alfa Romeo US came out and the GT US.
Alpha was 82, 83, yes, but these cars were earlier.
That's why I just asked you what year and you said 1982.
Because hold on.
You could get the GT V6 in 1981.
But it was out, yes, the only other European.
It's another European V6.
All right, so I fucked up twice in two ways. I fucked this up in two ways. Yes, so there was not a lot of options for V6s. God damn it. Anyway, yeah, good thing I fact checked this one. Glad we're doing this episode. But interestingly enough, later in the so Alfa Romeo was not part of the Fiat group when this whole thing started. Alfa Romeo joined the Tipo Quattro program later on its own, having nothing to do with anything, and then became part of the Fiat group right before the 164 launched. At that point, Fiat group, i.e. Lancia, gained access to the Busso V6. So the Thema, you could get either a
PRV
V6, which was a 90-degree V6, or the Busso, which was a 60-degree V6. Saabs were always their own four-cylinder, which was pretty amazing.
Or
a GM 54-degree V6.
Okay, so this Tipo Quattro was available now with 3 different V6 engines, each with different parentage and degreeage.
Yes. Plus,
but that was actually also the V6. The Saab V6 wasn't until the end. I think it was until 93.
Yeah, last 2 years.
Yeah.
Because Saab had been
GM'd.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love that right off. One of my favorite things about doing this research is that you have 4 cars that are effectively the same. When I started counting the number of engines available, there were 4 6 and 8 cylinder engines, all within 113 cc in displacement of each other.
So these are the 3 V6s and the V8,
Ferrari V8,
which was the Ferrari V8.
But
so
there were
one
also
of these
2 Bussos. It was the 2.5 liter that was in the Thema. The 3 liter was in the 164, and then you had the twin cam, the 4 cam Busso 3 liter. So there was a 2.5 liter Busso. I think there was a 2 liter turbo.
Yes,
so there was a 2 liter turbo Busso. 2.5 liter, 3 liter, and then a 3 liter 24. About 4 different Bussos. There's so many engines. There were 15 different 4-cylinders, gas engines, and then I think there were 5 different diesels from 3 or 4 different manufacturers.
Yeah, VM Motori, I'm sure, was one of them.
Fim, I think, was the name of the company that absorbed VM Motori. And then there was, I don't remember, there were 2 other. The amount of engines in this car was just insanity. Anyway, so Croma debuts. It's a full-size car, Croma Thema, and actually got pretty good reviews. It was, quite avant-garde looking, which is hilarious because to us they just look like boxes.
Yeah.
And it was quite a lovely car. But the Saab, I don't think I realized. I never thought about this. In 1984, when it debuted in the U.S., the 9000, and it took them a little bit of a while to get it to the U.S., to get it through crash tests.
85 model year.
84 as an 85, or 83 as 84, somewhere. One of those 2. Think about it this way. In 1984, Ferrari had just gone to 4-valve per cylinder in the Quattro Quattro cars, the 308. It was an 83 model year. This was not only double overhead cam, 4-valve per cylinders, but it was turbocharged and intercooled and had APC, which was the knock sensor boost control on top of it. They were like complete spaceships, technology-wise, and that's something we don't think of with Saab, especially given that all of the cars on the Tipo Quattro platform had an independent rear suspension, except the Saab 9000. And I don't think I knew this. The Saab 9000 used a beam axle. And I don't mean a torsion beam the way front-wheel drive cars do right now, like an actual beam, solid axle with a
like
Watts
trailing
linkage. And totally nuts.
It's just basically holding the back of the car off the ground.
And yet it was the best handling car of the bunch.
Did you confirm that?
No. I mean, yes, I did drive. So for the Revelations episode, I had the 3 fastest variants of the cars. There were no performance Fiats. Had there been a Fiat available to us for filming, I probably would have gotten one. But we could not find a single Fiat Croma anywhere in the US.
Does anybody out there who is consuming this know if there is a Fiat Croma in the United States?
If
I
you
would
do,
be interested.
Don't tell us because I don't want to know. It's too late.
I'm just curious if anybody knows of one. I mean, put it in the comments or whatever.
I asked the insurance guys. Haggerty does not insure a single Fiat Croma.
Not a one.
Not a one. Huh. And, I found a Thema 832 like that, a Saab 9000 Aero like that, and a 164Q. So what we had in the studio was the Q4. I found a Q first, and then we got the Q4. We had in the studio was the 3 fastest cars, which each of which, for its time, was either the most powerful or quickest or fastest front-wheel drive car on the planet when it debuted. And so the first...
We think, unless there's some other V6s. Never mind.
Do you want me to leave? I'm going to go hang myself in shame. You said do this episode now before it's not done yet. I'm kidding.
No, before the research wears off.
Well, the research wore off long ago because I did another Revelations worth of research afterwards, and now I'm doing 2 more. So if I get anything confused with Mercor XR4Ti and Ford Sierra, which I think had a 1.5 liter, and so that was when I just said the smallest engine was a 1.6. Don't believe me because I don't remember. I think it was a Lampredi 1.6 in the Fiat Croma, but I might be confusing that with what the smallest engine in a Ford Sierra, which was, I think, a 1.5.
Well, you're certainly not confusing it with the smallest engine in Chisetta Marauder.
We don't know. Can't believe anything. Anyway. So these are all fucking speed demons. That, the Saab 9000 Aero, Aero was the top spec, fastest one of the bunch.
Available from 93. So there was a heavy facelift in 93 for the Saab 9000. There was a smaller facelift in like 87 or 8.
Yes, 87.
But they were turbocharged from the outset, and I think from memory, yes, available with turbocharging early on with like 180,
160. So is it 160 horsepower, 2 liter, 16 valve? It eventually got balance shafts to smooth it out, and then was bumped out to 2.3 liters. And the 2.3, the highest output version of the 2.3 was the Aero motor.
When did the 2.3 arrive? Sorry. Sometime between 1984 and 1993.
I feel like it was at that facelift.
There was a 1990 Turbo, which was the predecessor of the Aero, and that one had 200 horsepower. And I was just wondering if that was a 2 liter.
The 200 was the 2 liter. It was the 2.3.
Okay.
Right. And actually, if you got the 2.3 Aero with an automatic, it was detuned down to 200.
Yes, to 200 instead of 225.
Car and Driver got a 6.2 to 60 out of the Aero. The 225 horsepower 5-speed. So all the cars we had were 5-speed. This is top spec stuff.
Except for the Q4 was not 5 speeds.
We're not going to talk about that yet.
Okay,
we're not there.
We're doing a separate.
But more importantly, 14.8 at 96 miles an hour through the quarter mile. That was a seriously fast car.
Yeah. I mean, I think at that time a 911 would have been in the 13s.
Severely in the 13s or barely in the 13s?
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like maybe... No, I guess 996 was almost out. So 964...
The 964 would be 0 to 60 in 4.9, and on quarter mile is in the, I think, first half of the 13s.
Okay. Yeah, it was the fastest front-wheel drive car. I mean, the only thing that I could find that was even remotely close, Randy Popes was like, Dodge Omni GLH, 7.5. But the only other car that I could find that was close was Taurus Show, which was fast, and that was not 6.2. I think that was 6.4, 6.5. And what I didn't realize about 9000 is that it's actually shorter than Saab 900.
What?
6 inches shorter.
I bet the wheelbase is longer.
It is longer.
The wheelbase is longer, but the overhangs are much shorter because the Saab 900 is composed entirely of overhang.
Yeah. The wheels touch each other in the center, and then there's just overhang on the side. It has the 9000 has 1.5 times the interior volume, and I'm not talking including cargo. I mean just interior volume.
It's a car that feels huge inside.
It's massive.
And the hatchback, when you fold it down, massive also.
Yeah, we did. We were going to record one scene with me sort of lying in the hatch, and it was very reminiscent of the Rover SD1. And we thought, forget it, I'll just sit in the driver's seat like a normal human being. But it's huge inside. Plus, I think the Aero I know the big Aero has big bolsters on the rear seats, and it doesn't easily fold all the way down, and so we just let it go. But the car is enormous on the inside and 6 inches shorter than the 900. Would have never thought that in a million years.
That surprises me.
And it won, so it debuted and immediately won. Car and Driver had done a 10 best issue, and it won Best Engine of the Year, which was the original 2-liter system.
Yeah, because it's so sophisticated, right? Yeah,
with APC and all that shit. But then the 9000 wound up on the 10 best list 4 years in a row, and the reviews were just like I feel like they did at least 12 road tests of 9000s through its life. Sure. I mean, I just was buried in magazines going through all these reviews. They loved it. I mean, everyone just loved that car. It won all the comparison tests always. It did really well. And I've always thought the 9000 was cool. I just didn't
know how cool it actually was.
I didn't know how good it was, I should say. Right? Just fundamentally good. You owned a 9000?
No, my mom had one when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
A turbo?
No.
Why not? I thought your mom was cool. What happened? My mom had a 900 turbo. So
this was in the era when gas broke $2 for the first time, and she was daily driving a Range Rover, and she said, "I just want something that is going to be like responsibly or more economical from a fuel perspective." And I found a 9000 CDE for her.
Corps diplomatique. CD.
Allegedly, yeah. The sedan. The sedan. So that it was extra uncool. Not only was it naturally aspirated, but it was also not a hatchback.
Yes, CD means diplomatic body en français, in French fry, which was the Saab term for the sedan. So it was a sedan manual?
Nope.
Get out. Get out. Give me your mother's phone number. We need to have a chat.
Well,
hold on. You found it for her. You get out. No.
I know. Well, I did what she asked me to do. I said,
never do what anyone asks you to do. Do what you want.
She replaced it 3 years later with a Jaguar. So
fabulous.
That lasted really well, as you can see. 2.5 years, actually.
Amazing to me that all of the handling praise for that car. So they did some pretty cool stuff. We're moving the Watts linkage around to the front side of the leading edge of the solid axle, which gave it some rear steer characteristics. And so it actually had some lift off oversteer and was really well balanced. And I'm guessing it was the rear suspension basically from the 900 that they just carried over with a bunch of changes. And I think they probably did that as a cost savings measure to undo all the expense they did on crash.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, it was engineering sort of familiar. Like they knew what levers to pull on to get certain characteristics to change. So if the concept wasn't like groundbreaking or like a whole bunch of uncharted territory for them, that makes sense.
You get in one of those cars and immediately all of the controls are just perfectly where you think they're going to be.
Yeah.
Like Saab's ergonomics were amazing.
Yeah.
Everyone bitched in period, and it certainly pissed me off that every time you turn the key on, it reverted to fan, like the fan was on high for the, not high, but obnoxious.
Yes,
and so
the
every
HVAC
time
comes on every time you turn on the car.
That is beyond stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, other than that, I just think it's kind of a marvel of packaging, and I loved Saab gauges, and I love that the headlight switch like illuminated right where you need it, and the big chunky buttons.
It's ergonomically nice. It's, I think, aesthetically attractive also. It has that sort of cockpitiness to it where there's this sort of area that is for the driver that's very delineated, that where all the controls are.
I didn't like that the ignition switch was on. I mean, so some of the period reviews, the bad stuff that people wrote was, where's the weird?
Oh, yes,
Which is
because
funny.
that was a characteristic. That was like a Saab trademark, and it was Saab trying to mainstream themselves and become commercially viable. So they turned out a lot, well, compared to the 900 and
Is
its
that why they were
weirdness.
doing it? Or was it
Or
because
it
they
was
had no
forced
choice?
upon them because
Yeah.
it was shared?
Yeah.
Sure, I mean,
Yeah.
but I also think if they want to sell at volume, they have to more mainstream their products a little bit.
For sure. I mean, I don't think they had a choice. Well, I'm curious what they would have done. But yeah, the ignition
Is it in a
switch
conventional
in a conventional
location?
location because it was shared with the other cars. You didn't have to put it in reverse to get the key out, that kind of stuff. But Saab did. I have a bunch of literature from back in the day. Saab was very proud that they made their own transmission for the car. So they did do a lot of stuff on their own. And remember that, the 900 was a longitudinal engine that was flipped 180 over 15 degrees or more, backwards. I mean, it was just complete batshit chain-driven transmission. And this was an entirely conventional transverse front-wheel drive layout. So they did have to make a new transmission.
It was being,
for it.
had become standardized for that time for front-wheel drive cars. I think this was probably one of the first applications of that in such a physically large car. That concept emerged like with the Mini, a very small car, and then it was, I think, Fiat with the 127, also a small car. The Delta, which was a size smaller than this, was like kind of a big car to have that arrangement. It was just, they were seeing how far they could go with the transverse conventional front-wheel drive arrangement, and I think this was one of the bigger cars at that point that had ever used that layout.
Yeah, and of course it's not big by today's standard, but it was enormous. These are full-size cars.
Yeah, they were executive cars. I mean, they were like sort of probably slotting somewhere bigger than a 3 Series and smaller than a 5 Series in terms of external dimensions.
I don't think they were that far off of 5s. Certainly not in width. I mean, they're wide cars.
Yeah.
The weird thing to me is you said attractive before, and I thought you were talking about the exterior styling for a second.
I think the exterior is, I think they're both attractive.
I did too, until we were looking at we looked at the Lancia for a while, the Thema, and we're like, okay, it's kind of, this car's a little bit mobster because it had tinted windows and it's this beautiful, like orangey red, with Ferrari looking wheels on it, factory wheels. And then we get the Saab and we're like, oh my God, this is so much more styled and it's so much more modern and whatever. And then we brought the Lancia back in and realized that by comparison, the Saab looked overinflated, bulbous, and awkward. It was really interesting to see how the Lancia just looked tailored. And
You're talking about the interior or the exterior?
Exterior.
Yeah, that was a facelift. They blobbed it as they got into the 90s. I think the earlier 9000's a little crisper, right? You think about the shape of the rear lights on that car, and it's a little bit more flat surfaces, I guess. They rounded it when they did the 93 facelift because that was the rage. Everything went extra aero and blobby, I think maybe in large part in response to the Ford Taurus, which came out in 1986. So that aero thing, the aerodynamic blobbiness was represented in the facelift. But I think the earlier 9000 is a more
sleek.
less
trim.
Yeah, it's more straight lines. It's more rational. It's more 124 adjacent. Mercedes 124 or Audi C3, the 5000 and 100 and 200 adjacent, where there's this sort of smooth straightness as opposed to just full-on rounded blobbiness, which became
Thema,
very 90s.
I mean,
which the Thema retained its entire lifespan despite getting a facelift allegedly. Two, yeah. This one was a Series 2. The
there were
832 only got one because I think they didn't come out early enough to get the first facelift.
Yeah, and they basically ignored the second facelift. But the Thema was much more. The Thema looked a decade older than that facelift did. Saab did. Yeah. Thema's interesting. Okay, so Thema comes out with that PRV V6, bunch of Lampredi twin cam 4-cylinders, and then somehow talk Enzo into giving them the 3-liter V8 from the Ferrari 308 Quattro Valvole. Clarkson mistakenly said it was a 3.2 liter. It was not. It was a 3.0. And when you look at the timeline, that engine had been retired the same year. So Ferrari,
in favor of the 3.2.
Yeah. So, you see the Enzo agreeing, fine, you can have the 3-liter. We're using a 3.2 now.
It's exactly the same thing he did. Well, he didn't do it. but Ferrari did it a decade earlier. Did Enzo actually do this, or was this
Enzo signed off on it.
Ugo Gobato or somebody at Fiat who was actually doing this?
I mean, Enzo was still ostensibly in charge of Ferrari. I don't know how much
but
pressure.
not
was
really
under.
road cars. I mean, but after the Fiat takeover, he was really focused on race cars, and then like I think there was a guy named Ugo Gobato who was a Fiat man who was responsible for Ferrari road cars.
I
Would
know
have to
that
sign off. On all
Enzo
this
absolutely refused to let them call it the Ferrari Lancia 832.
Uh-huh.
So I know he was at least.
He was
involved in
now
that.
at that point no longer like the guy who couldn't control or who couldn't maintain control after the Fiat takeover, and he was like an old revered figure. So I can imagine they would give him sort of that type of control. But a decade earlier, the Ferrari engine ended up in a Lancia, which was the Stratos, and that was another thing that the Ferrari had to approve. And they were like, "Okay, we're done with these. You can have them." That was kind of part of the reason why it was okay, because the Stratoses were all built as the Dino's production was wrapping up. So, same thing, just a decade earlier.
Yep. So they shoehorned. I mean, if you think about it, the PRV V6 was a 90-degree V6. So, and mounted transversely, that means it's wide front to rear in the engine compartment.
Yes.
And then all of the four cylinders were long.
Right,
left
4
to
cylinders
right.
long.
And so you have something that's four cylinders, as long as a four cylinder and as wide as
the
a
V6.
90-degree V6, well, the V8's going to fit. Dude, that barely fits.
Yeah.
I mean, the cooling fan is within a half or 3/4 of an inch of the valve cover on the front valve cover. It's tight in there. But Ferrari did. Actually, Ducati built a lot of those engines towards the end because Ferrari didn't have a capacity to do it.
Where they were busy making 3.2s and then 3.4s.
Yep. But it was a cross-plane crank version.
Yes. So why did they do that?
They for what they. I'm sorry, I'm putting my phone on Do Not Disturb because things are going crazy. My weather station is texting me because there are gusts of wind over 35 miles an hour.
Hopefully your weather station hasn't blown away.
Hasn't blown away. Exactly.
It's telling you that it's on its way into orbit.
Yeah, if you guys hear weird noises in the background, it's because the
weather station is
no, it's not. The weather station
knocking
is
on
hit
the door trying to get in.
Comes flying through the window. They did it for NVH, noise, vibration, harshness. Ostensibly, and it could be maybe that Ferrari didn't want his sports car motor in. Ferrari didn't want its sports car motor in the Lancia, but actually flat plane crankshaft V8s vibrate like two four cylinders arguing. Basically, it's two four cylinders vibrating together, so you have twice the vibration of a four cylinder, which really isn't appropriate for a luxury car. And the Thema was very much a luxury car. And you'll find that the same thing that Maserati did with the Quattroporte, and all of the Ferrari V8s have crossplane cranks in the Maserati. And I just don't think a flat plane works. Like I haven't driven a GTC current, not the Lusso, the GTC4 Lusso is a V12, but the regular GTC is a flat plane V8. And I just can't imagine that engine matching that body style. For example, I just, you get a luxury car like that, or, some luxury GT.
Because it sounds like a Honda 4-cylinder.
Yeah. It's just not the most pleasant noise, and it's not the most pleasant feeling in a automatic sort of sedan for today. For back then, this was just, I believe the Thema used exactly the same transmission as the Alfa did, which tells me it's just an off-the-shelf, Fiat Group 5-speed. Traditional layout, but right into the front wheels. And so
it's a cross-plane 3-liter 32-valve V8.
Yep. 215 horsepower, which made it at the time, because this came out in 87, was the most powerful front-wheel drive car.
Yeah, because the Saab had 200 horsepower and 90. And the Alfa didn't exist yet.
And the Tour Show was not for sale in Europe.
The what?
The Taurus.
Oh,
the Taurus
Show. Yes.
That was 220 horsepower, but I think that was 2 years later. Anyway.
89.
Yeah. So I think this was 87 and that was 89. So 215 V8 horsepower to the front wheels. What could possibly go wrong? But the wildest thing about the Thema to me is two things. Number one, how incredibly subtle the differences are between it and the regular Thema. Yellow badges and a yellow hand-painted pinstripe from the factory, all done in Ferrari yellow. It's the color of the Ferrari badge. And
Modena yellow.
Yeah. Which is, exactly. That yellow is taken from the Modena's flag, right? But just an egg crate grill instead of the lines.
Egg crate grill, because Ferrari always used egg crate grills back into the 50s, maybe 40s even. So that is a nod.
A little bit of a nod. Ferrari-looking 5-spoke wheels.
Yeah.
It
had 4 or 5 lugs.
5 lugs, and all of the other Temas were 4.
Okay.
So that's a bit of a giveaway. Twin exhausts. I mean, not like just 2 pipes next to each other, and then the world's first motorized rear spoiler.
Which is like the coolest part of the entire car, I think.
Maybe
the entire coolest part of the back of the car.
Yes, exactly.
Of the part aft of the firewall.
The way it works is the coolest.
Yeah,
thing because it's a flush-mounted thing that pops up and out, and together with it in one piece is another sail. What would you call it? That actually pops up and then reseals the trunk.
Yes. So what was previously the top of the trunk lid now becomes the top of the wing once it has deployed.
Yeah. With another false floor that comes in and completes it. I just think that's just the bee's knees.
It's really, really cool. And it doesn't take up much space in the trunk. You think it's going to be quite sort of, you look at the underside of the trunk lid and you're like, oh, it's not that substantial, actually. Yeah. It's impressive.
It's pretty cool. Car had adaptive shocks, or, 2-mode electronically controlled shocks. And the soupiest 5-speed linkage I think I've ever touched in my life. It's very much like we made a lovely tomato sauce and some meatballs in there, and you got to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, we've bumped up against a meatball. Let's try over here and see if we can find a gear over here.
Yeah, exactly. What a cool car, though.
The interior, I think, is the part of the car that just really differentiates it.
The whole thing is lined in leather.
Yeah, and it's all this saddle color, this very Italian sort of brown color. That's the only interior color I think that was available. Were they available with blacks?
I don't know, but you can maybe the base interior was actually Alcantara. So I don't know, but it was. I mean, if they were to do multiple colors, when I say everything is leather, the center console, the shift booth, the
visors,
dashboard, the visors, the A-pillars, the roof
shit handles.
Yeah, the roof was Alcantara inset in, I think that was vinyl.
With like faux stitching.
Unbelievable.
It's very premium.
Yeah.
And briarwood.
And even
trim.
the center console, so when the sort of upper dash has 3 Ferrari round
circle vents.
When the regular car had a big blocky rectangular one. So they really did change this interior.
Yeah. The funny thing is that I think a lot of people who would buy that, I don't know, if you were buying that car, did you own a Ferrari or would you come from a Lancia? Like those cues, you have to know where those cues come from and when you get in that car in order to recognize them. And if you haven't spent time in a Ferrari before, you might miss the fact that there's a bunch of Ferrari cues inside that car.
Yeah. But I like that for those who know,
Yeah. Yeah. The rear headrests are worth mentioning.
Rear headrests are motorized. So everyone talks about like the 124 Mercedes era headrests that you can sort of erect them.
Yeah, you manually pull them up and then they lock in position.
Right, and if you...
Or they have another position which is just retracted when they're flat on the parcel shelf.
And if you, from the driver's seat, you can hit a button which uses a little vacuum solenoid to just unlock them and they drop down.
Yes, with a terrific bang. That sounds very not expensive.
Yeah, it's
very jarring and crashy.
Yeah. These are motorized, and it's not the most expensive sound in the world, if I'm honest, either, because Italians. But as they come up slowly, and they come up, but each of them operates individually based on that door. So if I open the left rear door, that headrest motors up. And then if after I close the door, after a certain amount of seconds, if nothing is in the seat, I think it's a 20 kilo sensor, so 44 pounds. If there's more than 44 pounds on the seat, it stays up. Otherwise, it goes back down. I think that was a really nice touch.
Yeah, but there's also that sensor will trigger it to go up. Like, for example, I moved across the seat to the back side, to the other back seat from the left door to the right seat, and then the headrest came up. I thought that was very cool.
It makes what a noise.
Yeah.
What a noise.
It does not sound Italian because you expect an Italian V8 to be a flat plane, and it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like an American V8.
It is, yes, it's small block. And it's one of them. I hope when I see the final episode or the final edit of the Revelations episode, we do the drive.
Which you have perhaps consumed already. Viewers have consumed already on YouTube.
Should have been out for a couple days now. I don't think we did a great job of capturing the sound, which is very difficult to do with equipment on the car. The best way to capture sound of a car is outside and have it drive by. One of the most musical V8s I've heard in the mid-range.
And there's plenty of good stuff on YouTube. There's lots of clips of them. There's a black one in like the Netherlands or something where the guy clearly took all the mufflers off of it or something, and it just sounds like the most sinister, like you do not want to meet this at night in a dark alley because it's going to eat you.
Yeah.
Like it's really, really meaty sounding. It sounds like an American V8. It's very
noise.
cool.
And fast. Fast. I was shocked at how hard that thing pulls to 7,500 RPM. Like it moves.
Which is funny because the chassis doesn't, as far as I can tell, have a lot of sporting intent.
So on a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of sporty, if like a Taurus Show is a 2 and a Saab 9.3 is a 2, this was a 1. This is definitely not. So this car had Coney shocks on it. I'm pretty sure the front springs have sagged with time because it sits really low. It didn't like bumps in the middle of a corner, like, once you're leaned over. So I kind of think the suspension on this particular car could be updated. I'd raise the front, certainly. But it did not. Very much struck me as in the same way as the Taurus Show. It's a luxury. It's there for ride quality and brute force power.
Yes,
and beautiful sound.
It's like a 6.9, right?
Yes,
it's like a limousine that has a big motor, and it's not a sports sedan. It's just a sedan with a lot of horsepower.
Sedan with a jetpack on it.
Yeah.
Which I was kind of hoping it would be like genuine sports sedan, but
everything I've ever heard about those cars is that they are luxury cars with a lot of horsepower as opposed to a sports sedan.
You should go drive this car. It is for sale. The seller is a wonderful guy. He it's Euro Classics is the place. It's actually on Craigslist. Advertised for sale, has been for quite a while. And this guy loaned, the owner of Euro Classics owned us the Alfa SZ that I did a Revelations on a couple years ago. Total sweetheart of a guy. The car is fucking so cool.
Yeah.
So it was the one
Immensely
of the group
cool
that I wanted to meet more than anything else.
Yeah.
Really, really neat car. And then there's the Alfa.
Yes. The Alfa is designed by Pininfarina. I guess we can...
Which I find very interesting. So remember, the other cars were done by Giorgetto Giugiaro at Ital Design. There was a Thema wagon, and the Thema wagon was done by Pininfarina. And so you can imagine...
I have seen someone who made a 832 wagon.
There was one officially made for Agnelli.
That makes perfect
Fiat
sense.
boss. Silver with blue interior.
Yeah.
Sold a couple years ago at
Same
auction.
color combo as his Testarossa convertible that he had made.
Was silver blue?
I think so.
Huh.
It was definitely silver. I think it was blue inside.
Interesting. I'd fucking kill for a Thema wagon. That's so cool. But not only did Pininfarina design the wagon, but they built it. So you can imagine Giugiaro must have been like furious. Like I'd be so pissed. I design a car and then...
Did Giugiaro ever have manufacturing facilities? I actually don't know the answer to that. Did Ital Design actually build anything or did they just design them?
Yes, M1. I think they coordinated the building of BMW M1. That was Giugiaro, wasn't it?
They designed it. I don't know if they built it.
I think they actually wound up being the company that assembled it. They organized everything, they orchestrated everything. But yeah, I would be pretty pissed if like I designed a sedan and they give it to my crosstown rival to do the wagon version of it and then have them build it. But yes, so when Alfa joins the Tipo Quattro program, because as usual, Alfa's bankrupt, doesn't have any money, they start on a project called the 154, which was their replacement full-size sedan for the Giulia, I guess.
No, for the Milano, for the 75.
Milano hadn't happened yet.
What? Oh, sorry. What year are we talking?
We're talking 1980.
Okay.
81, 82.
So this would be replacing, is full-size sedan?
Well,
the biggest sedan they
car.
made would be the Say, which is a big six-cylinder V6.
Maybe
the first place the Busso ever appeared was in the Say.
It must have been the replacement for that because this was before Milano, before the 75. And they start working on a rear drive car. They're effectively done with it in terms of layout and everything's transaxle, the whole sort of Alfa experience. Ran out of money and said, fuck. And they joined the Tipo Quattro program.
Have they been bought by Fiat at this point?
No, that's the wild thing, is that the 164 debuted 2 months after Fiat bought Alfa Romeo, but the whole project was done before they were actually related to each other. And Alfa didn't like a bunch of things about the car. They wanted a lower roof, a sleeker design. And so they basically chopped the center section out of the car and made their own. The roof line was 1.3 inches lower than Lancia's. Pretty significant difference. But they used the front and rear structures, meaning the independent rear suspension from the Thema Croma, not the solid beam from the Saab, but the front suspension from all of the cars, which was a strut. They modified it ostensibly for a lower hood, but I don't think it actually has a lower hood. I mean, you look at where the shock towers are on the same. But of the cars, this is the only one that has its own doors, right? So the doors on the 9000 Thema and Croma are effectively interchangeable, and then Alfa has Pininfarina to design it, and wow, when you see that car next to the others, like the difference an inch makes in terms of height. It looks long and low and sporty and fucking elegant and gorgeous. And holy shit, that car is beautiful.
That's funny. I always liked that car. I never thought it was beautiful, though.
I'm talking about in relation to the others.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
I think it's a great looking car.
Yes, I think it's great looking. I think
Especially
it's
the
very
back.
handsome. It's so incredibly sort of wedgy in that the rationalness of all the straight lines. It's very sort of unfussy in most respects, certainly the fundamental shape. I think it's too rectilinear to be beautiful, but it's aged very well now. And now I actually see it. But as a child, I never thought it was beautiful. But my definition of what a beautiful sedan was when I was a child was an XJ6.
Yeah,
So,
voluptuous and
yes,
round and soft
exactly.
and feminine. When you see it relative to the other cars, you just see to me, the 164 always looked a decade newer than the other two cars. Than the Thema Croma, right? Those were very sort of upright, tall headlights, tall windows, very 80s looking. And to me, the 164 is 90s looking.
Huh. I don't get that at all. It looks very 80s to me because it's so straight lines. There's nothing blobby. There's nothing arrow. There's nothing
I guess it's
ovoid about it.
It must be. I mean, it was the best aerodynamically of the bunch, but I guess it to me it reads 90s because it has flush headlights and just a very like smaller flush headlight. I don't know. No, girl.
What is your favorite design characteristic of that car?
Taillights, the back end. That Toyota did copied for the 95 Camry. 96 Camry.
96.
The
Or might
Top
have
Road
even been
Camry.
97.
97. One of that full width rear tail. I think the back end of the car is stunning. Always did.
I love the shape of the taillights and how that continues into the fenders and the doors and the front fenders. And
With the handles in the middle.
Yes, at the handles. And it starts at the front fender right behind the turn signal. It goes all the way around the car, all the way around the back, across the back, and around the other side.
Yeah.
I think that is super, super cool.
So beautifully Italian restrained. Italians are best when they're restrained. And that's in terms of design, I think. Otherwise, they do things like this 812
Competizione.
That looks like a Mansory nightmare. But I love the way that interior looks. I love the keyboard worth of gauges.
And the fact that the exterior design motif is repeated inside the car, that interior and that exterior speak to each other. I think a lot of cars, you can tell the interior and exterior were done by different teams who never talked to each other other than to discuss where the sort of hard points were that they couldn't exceed. But that car, the interior and exterior look like they were designed by people who were smoking the same thing.
At the same smoking out the same bong. They this one, all of the period road tests were like, you open this up and it smells like a handbag. This car is now, the car that we had here is 30 years old. And
it's one of the newest.
Right. And
it's one of the last made.
Stunk in the most incredible way. You open the window and the whole studio smells like this incredible leather. Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
I want another one.
Plus, all of the other cars have cable shifters, so they all feel like shit. Alfa used the same transmission as the Lancia, same gear ratios and everything else on the 5-speed, but like beautiful
That's
short
one of the
throws.
things I remember. So I have mentioned a number of times I owned one of these cars, and it has a wonderful shifter. I was shocked the first time I drove it because that's transverse front wheel drive. It's going to be just miserable, and it was really just full on sports car. It's really.
As soon as I started moving in this car, I rejoiced out loud because the shifter is amazing, and then the steering. You'd never believe it was related to the other cars. I said that in the video because it whoosh, snaps right to center. It's got a really deep effort curve, tremendous amount of feel. Not as much torque steer as I would have ever imagined in a car this powerful. We'll get to that in a second. But but just very different driving experience from the other two cars.
My impression also, the chassis is pretty athletic. Like it feels like a car that is interested in going faster, as opposed to my impression of the Saab that I've driven. I've never driven the Thema, but the Saabs I've driven, that they're fast in a straight line, but it's not a car that inspires you to hustle it. And the Alfa is interested.
I mean, all it takes is you floor it in the Saab, right, for example, so that neither the Saab nor the Thema could put it all down in first gear, which, of course, instant wheel spin, sign me up, right? I'm a happy guy. So the Thema would just fucking, I didn't mean to when we went into the back roads, but I sort of pull out into traffic and, squeeze into the throttle and just ignited the front wheels. And it's got, I don't remember what tires are on this particular car, but they're not very grippy at all. And they're very talkative. So it just lit up the front in this beautiful rolling burnout. And then, you shift at $7,000 or whatever. And the next gear is sort of right on top of it. And it's ready to go again and happy to go again. And then you turn the wheel. There's no waiting. There's not great body control. It's kind of a slow rack. The Saab, you get in, you get nothing, boost, and the vacuum cleaner goes crazy because it sounds like a vacuum. And in the video, of course, we have the cars, the engine's mic'd, the exhaust is mic'd, and so you'll hear some blow off valves that sound really cool. You don't really hear them in the car. But that car just kind of lights them up and very long first gear, and then you shift it like 5,500 from first, and I swear you wind up at 1,100 RPM in second gear. It's hugely widely spaced gears that just tell you, I am not interested in hustling at all. I will go really, really fast, but begrudgingly. The Alfa, and this was a Q4, it's a 6-speed, we'll get to that in a second. Oh, you shift and you're like, did I just shift? Because I'm already, goddamn rev limiter, oh my God, again. The gears are so closely stacked on top of each other and the engine is so vocal that you just think you immediately, between that and the steering weight.
To you in the car, that's vocal.
Yeah.
Not much exhaust noise
nothing
in this
outside.
particular one.
But you are told I'm in a sports sedan and let's go party. Mm-hmm. Total personality difference between the other cars. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the 164 debuts, it's a fucking disaster. I mean, reliability wise.
Oh, yes.
Sales disaster.
I thought you meant the debut party went badly.
Did it? Is that a thing that I was supposed to know? Okay. It just, all of the Car Magazine cars broke down. And remember that Alfa was coming off of the Milano in the US. Mm-hmm. So not only was the 164 3 years after the Croma, no, it was 3 years after the Thema. So it was the last to this party. But Alfa Romeo delayed it by 3 more years to get it right. And they did millions of development miles, and they knew they had to undo the damage that the Milano did. And the Milano,
in the psyches of American consumers.
Yes. And the Milano, I love a Milano. Mm-hmm. I think there were 4 long-term tests, none of which made it to completion. One of the cars burned to the ground or had some sort of engine fire. One threw a rod through the side of the block. One was constant problems. And I think Car and Drivers was the one where they're like, we're just going to give this back to you and we're not going to talk about this ever again. Like it was that bad. And those are the press cars. That's as good as it gets. The American buying public was stung really hard by Alfa Romeo's reliability.
Woes.
Woe is generous. Disaster is the only word for it. And so they delayed this thing for 3 more years to get it right. And Car and Driver is like, well, we put 3,000 miles on our car and we experienced a couple of breakdowns. And I mean, we did a segment on it for the video because I just had to laugh about the shit that broke on this car. You're like 180. I said, what? Hold on. They did 2.7 million development miles. Did the car that they gave Car and Driver have 2.7 million miles on it? Because if you gave me a 2.7 million mile car and I put 3,000 miles on it and that much shit broke, I would have been upset. And this was ostensibly a brand new car. Needless to say, this is the car that was going to save Alfa Romeo in America, and it was the final bullet.
Right around the same time as another car, which people always think is related but isn't, which also was designed by Pininfarina, that also put another mark out of its misery in the United States.
Peugeot 405. Yeah. No, it's
that car
Peugeot.
looks like looks like a Tipo Quattro product, but it's not.
I don't think I really ever paid attention to that. You're totally right.
Yeah, it looks like the 5th twin.
Well, and then you can add the 6th to it, which was the Infiniti G20. which looked like
that car looks smaller to me.
it is. It's 405 size.
Really?
But yeah, to me, it always looked like a knockoff 405.
Okay.
Anyway, I guess Pininfarina made a pretty car.
Who could ever imagine that happening?
Shocker. Ferrari's design house, effectively. Yeah, so that car came out. It had in the U.S. only a 3-liter Busso. It's the only engine available.
There were 3 trim levels initially: the base, the L, and the S.
Oh, I didn't realize there was a base on top.
Yeah, there was a base
the trim level
on bottom.
Confusing because
in the U.S.
Yeah, because there was a base, an L, and an S, and then a couple years in, they did a facelift on the car.
Yes. So this was for 94. So 91, 92, 93, you had, I don't know if the base went all 3 years. I think they might have dropped it, and then it was just the L and the S.
Yes. And there were substantive differences. The L and the S had different cams in them.
Yes.
They had different power outputs, different pistons.
183 horsepower versus 200 horsepower.
Right. Which is pretty wild that they would do different pistons and compression ratio, different cams, just like different actual engines.
And different wheels and the body kit and the seats.
That is kind of normal,
yes,
right?
Yes.
But different power outputs. It's not like like Camry SE gets 5 more horsepower. Accord EX is at the time.
CHP.
Fair point.
It's happened.
It's happened.
It has happened. Yeah. But not typical, especially for a brand that's trying to just sort of minimum viable product their way to the marketplace.
So 94, the car gets an upgrade, and I love my favorite part of that upgrade. It was a whole new wiring harness, and they used aerospace electrical connectors that actually click together. What a concept, right? And something that vibrates, whatever, high tech.
Yeah.
And the update was mostly to address reliability, but gave it a 24-valve 4-cam Busso, also 3 liters. Power went to 200 for the base car.
210, I think.
210 for the base car?
It was 210 for the base car.
And then 230.
Yeah, for the replacement for the S, which was the Quadrifoglio.
Right.
They called it the Q because they rightfully thought Americans wouldn't be able to pronounce it.
Quattro Formaggio.
Quattrofoglio, right? People would always say that. But it was just the Q. And interestingly, the S in Europe, the entire duration of the S, what we got here as the S was sold in Europe for its entire duration as the Q there.
Quadrifoglio
Verde.
Verde, yeah, green, right? So, which is fucked up because at the time, the Milano, a couple years earlier, all of them were Quadrifoglio. They were all, so there was the...
there was the silver, the platinum, the gold, and the Verde, which
green.
Sat at the top.
Yeah, just hello. People can't even, keep track of...
Yeah,
and know what the hell the color
means.
means.
That the green is better than the platinum.
Right, come on. No. Anyway, 4-leaf clover should always be green, I think, in nature. Unless they're yellow, in which case they're dying, and like Alfa Romeo did.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, so the Q in America wound up being the 230 horsepower 4-cam Busso. That is the most powerful variant of all of the Tipo Quattro cars.
Did the Q4 also have 230 horsepower?
Yes.
Not 240?
We never got the Q4 in the U.S.
Yes, we never got the Q4 in the United States.
Q came to the U.S., they sold 90-something of them.
Yeah, I've heard it was 95. Sometime maybe it's as much as 150. In any case, they sold less than 200 of them.
Right. Crazy, crazy rare cars. I found one locally. And a U.S. market Q. Lost my mind. I'm like, this is amazing.
You also drove the black Q that I almost bought.
Yeah. That was... I didn't drive it. I only rode the passenger seat. And that was the best sounding 6-cylinder I've ever heard bouncing off of city walls. And
I was driving that car to a PPI. I've told this story before. It came with a $7,000 recommended list of things that it needed, including a oil leak onto the clutch. So I didn't buy it.
Done it.
Well, I bought another one later, and it was also a very poor experience. No, it was an S.
Yeah. So you don't need that. You want the Q. You want the 24.
I've been scared off of the 24-valve cars a little bit because there's less contact area between the timing belt and the sprockets, and I've heard that they jump timing more easily. And the one that I was looking at, that had 55,000 miles, had gotten a replacement engine at the dealer at 29,000 miles because it jumped timing.
Yeah, you can't spin the motor backwards.
Yeah, so you have to park it in neutral.
Or reverse if you're facing up a hill. But that noise that thing makes.
I know. Incredible. So it's a shame that the one that you ended up with for your video didn't have an exhaust on it.
Well, let me tell you, the one that I wound up with the video is museum quality, stunning
Yeah,
car.
spectacular
Absolutely
condition.
spectacular. All of the owners for all three cars, couldn't have been more amazing. This guy's owned the car for 400 years. He put it through a cosmetic restoration. So this is a Q4, which means it's four-wheel drive.
Which was not offered in the United States, but was in outside of the United States.
And they only sold 1,000 or 1,200 of these. It wasn't a lot of these cars. Yeah. The all-wheel drive system wasn't some prehistoric shit pile. It was actually developed by Steyr Daimler Puch, the company that makes the
one
G-Wagon.
part of the car that works faultlessly.
Yep. Except that it was a computer-controlled center diff that took into consideration engine speed, road speed, load, steering angle, and wheel slip to determine how much lockup to give that center clutch back. Plus a Torsen limited slip at the back. Oh. So it was like no joke.
So this was like a rally car, or like a very competent snow
Evo,
car,
yeah. Right? I mean, pretty amazing stuff. Plus a 6-speed. It was just this is the holy grail 164.
How was it dynamically? Did it feel?
Well, it put the power down.
Yes.
So there was that, and put the power down no matter where I asked it to do it.
Do you think that you would have preferred the front wheel drive version dynamically, or do you think that the 4-wheel drive version was an improvement?
I don't know. I've seen some videos of performance driving in 164s where they laid so much tire that you couldn't even see the car through the smoke, and just sort of like on a racetrack. I suspect I would prefer a 164 front wheel drive car if it had a limited slip, and I don't believe one was available. Don't quote me on that. This thing put the power down in an undramatic fashion, which I'm typically not a fan of. But this car also had a weird. I talked to the owner about this. I yelled at him for two things. Number one, please check the rear suspension bushings, because there was a sort of secondary turn. I didn't yell at him. I said, hey, listen, here's my impression. I yelled at him about the other thing, but this was like, hey, listen, I wasn't 100% comfortable pushing this car to the limit, because I'm on a road with ditches, trees, drop off, the whole thing, and this car was like, you could cry looking at it. It was such beautiful condition. Not a single warning light. Everything worked. I mean, this is just like, doesn't happen. And the guy built a 3.2 for it. He put a stroker crank in it. So like, it's just holy fucking grail 164. Nothing was happening to it. But when I turn in, the back would walk a little bit. And even on a straightaway, it did a little bit of a crab. And he had said that he did everything, but he hadn't done the rear suspension bushings yet. And I don't know if something was loose, or that's just how they tracked with the all-wheel drive system. I don't
remember. Well, mine was a front-wheel drive car, but I remember it being dynamically open to being hustled and it not being scary. It was a car that I felt like was like spiritually close to a hot hatch, just bigger and heavier. But it felt sort of, mine at least, was a car that I enjoyed kind of driving quickly and wanted to go faster in.
I could see that. This one, it would have taken me. I would have had to put it on a lift and make sure nothing was broken, and then it would have taken me a little bit of time to trust it. Once I trusted that nothing was going to break or fall off, I could have really pushed that car. The thing that I yelled at him about, which I had to laugh while doing it, is I know this car is beautifully stock and it's perfectly presented and perfectly representative of what this car should look like. Where's your exhaust? Yeah. He's like, I put a factory exhaust in. I'm like, and I don't blame you at all, because this car is a time capsule and it's perfect and it's amazing, but get that fucking exhaust on and put something obnoxious on it. Yeah. And it's, of course I'm contradicting myself. And so I had to laugh at that, but
but once you hear what it's capable, the noises that engine is capable of making. I mean, the one that I bought, the S, sounded wonderful, very similar to the black one that you and I drove. But I mean, just once you realize that potential exists, it's like, oh, you have to do an exhaust.
Yeah. This, I don't blame him. He's now considering putting an exhaust on it, and I don't blame him if he keeps it stock. What I will say is, Anthony Esposito is very hard to please when it comes to. He's, my director, but he's like autistic when it comes to car sounds. And when it comes to engine noise, he's very difficult to please. He's got a really, really
high standard
and a well-tuned ear. And I have sent him videos of Busos, and he's never loved them. And I'm like, no. So I sent him a video of a 916, or no, one of the other front-wheel drive 3.2 Busos. It's uncorked. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, well, it's kind of got a VR6 warble with a little bit of a sizzle on top. And he's sort of using his words to describe it. He didn't seem to love it. he wasn't impressed by this. He's never been impressed by any Busso we've ever had, from the SZ that we drove to my buddy's Mark's Milano Verde. He didn't think anything of that at all.
I have never met a Busso V6 in a longitudinal installation that I thought sounded as good as the transverse ones. I have no idea what the difference is, but
Different header length.
yeah, I guess.
2.5 liter. So the only one that I've loved is because I love the Busso in theory, and then I hear them in person, and I'm like, okay, it's fine. What I love about the Busso is it doesn't have that mid-range 3,000 to 5,000 RPM harshness that V6s do, that other V6s do. But like your 2.5 liter and your GT-V6, I did not care for.
That one was really raunchy.
Yeah, but I've driven a stock 2.5 liter GT-V6, and it was beautiful. And that's the only one that I've liked. Even this one I didn't particularly love. I mean, it sounds nice and it's pleasant, but I don't think it sounded as good as a Taurus show.
Well,
for example,
all the 164s that I have driven that have had exhausts on them are just like unreal.
Yeah. The one that we were in honestly sounded better than just about every V12 I've ever driven.
Yeah.
It was spectacular.
Yeah.
So, a very different driving experience than the other two. I had the most fun in the Lancia because it had the least grippy tires and just instant torque and wheel spin, and I just pushed 10% harder than I probably should have in somebody else's car. But it loved every minute of it. The Saab was the least fun because the brakes on the second corner going up the hill, the brake pedal got hard. And I was like, no, we're not gonna experiment with this. I'm not gonna cook the brakes on this beautiful Saab. And then the Alfa was somewhere in between. I think would have been, I mean, certainly the shifter, the motor, the gearing, so much of that car, the steering was exquisite. I think had I trusted it more, I would have.
And had it made the noises that you know that it is capable of making.
And then the annoying part is that Esposito's here, and we get him when we're done, and I give him the keys to Beatrice to take it to my shipbox E30 with an obnoxiously loud exhaust on it, and take it to go to lunch. And he's like, why have any of those cars when you could just have this? It sounds better than all of them combined. It's quicker than them all. It's not quicker than the Saab. But that was the car that he was interested in. I'm like, damn it. So much. I thought I was going to convert him because as soon as he laid eyes on the 164, I saw him scrolling through Facebook Marketplace. He's like, I can fit my kids in this. I can fit my wife in this. I can fit my life in this. It'll look great next to all my other cars. And then once he drove it, he was like, it's a front wheel drive car. So,
yeah. There is a limit to what you can do with front wheel drive, especially when it's big. If it's spiritually a hot hatch, maybe. But I would like to own another one. I would like to own a good one. The one that I owned was not good.
So, would you own a 9000? What was that? What language was that?
I would. If the 164 didn't exist, yes. I think that's the answer.
I would have a Thema.
Yeah.
I think that car is, a really well-sorted, beautiful condition Thema where everything worked and I wasn't scared to. Never
so
mind.
the embarrassing, while we're talking about big Italian sedans, maybe not embarrassing, this is just esoteric, but I've been sort of recently on a quiet kick. Thank God that I've never seen one in the United States, so hopefully there aren't any here, which means there's a barrier to getting one. So hopefully that stands me in some good stead to prevent me from irresponsibly buying one. But the car that I want is the big Fiat sedan from the late 60s, early 70s that has a single overhead cam V6 and a dogleg, which is called the Fiat 130 sedan.
Okay.
And this thing is just like, it's an esoteric car even more so than the Thema, but it's conceptually, it's like a mob car. You look at it and you're like, oh, that is very much like an Italian mafia car, but it was meant to be sort of a competitor to a Mercedes sedan, and you could get it initially with the 2.8 and then with the 3.2 V6 with a dogleg, although a lot of them have automatics. And that's the like other dumb sedan thing. I just have this dumb sedan habit that I don't know, just exists. So here we are.
I don't know. The idea, that noise from that Thema.
Yeah.
And that interior.
Yeah.
Just to be in something that luxurious
of
that era would be kind of very cool. But I wish it drove like the 164. And then had the space of that Saab. The Saab was fucking massive inside.
Yeah.
Massive. It's amazing that it's the same car as the Thema, because the Thema is like, okay, this is a nice big car. You know, it's a nice big on the inside, not too big on the outside. You open the Saab and you're like, hello.
Yeah.
Holy shit, you could fit the whole IKEA in there.
They're all very cool.
Yeah.
The Croma is probably the least cool because there wasn't a spicy variant of it, but an interesting experiment. So what is the takeaway from all of this? I mean, what did you conclude, or what is the significance? Is this something about badge engineering? Is this about...
So there are two. I mean, the sort of rational conclusion is if you're going to platform share, you can actually give cars such a distinct personality that you'd never believe they're related.
Yeah.
And you would never believe that 9,000...
Platform sharing done right.
Except that
for the
all
consumer.
of the... Well, Lancia and Saab both admitted that they actually saved no money by platform sharing. And so, you know, on the one hand, none of those companies would have survived, and none of those cars, none of them did, effectively, right? This was the last hurrah. But, you know...
Fiat's still around.
I mean, okay, but Lancia's kind of not. This was the last real Lancia.
Lancia's really dead.
Right. And then, you know, Saab, they got a rebadged Opel Vectra as an X95. It was kind of over for both. Like, they just extended the inevitable by one generation of cars. But they didn't save any money in retrospect, but it wouldn't have been possible had they started out. So it wasn't really a viable economic policy to save money by platform sharing, but then doing your own shit. Like, it was just stupid. So you're really just staving off the inevitable and just kill the company in advance. But they did sell 1.7 million cars over 14 years on this platform. And so that's a hell of a large amount of cars that the world would have never seen. And to have 3 of them be the quickest, most powerful, or fastest front-wheel drive car of their time is pretty cool.
They have a lot of character, right? This is a genre of car that doesn't have that much character for the most part, especially now. And this is like probably the end. This is the start of the end, I guess, of that sort of really strong differentiating identity that was possessed certainly by Saab and by Alfa Romeo and by Lancia. And this is sort of them trying to get with it while still maintaining that. It's an interesting tension to observe in those cars.
The conclusion I made in the video, which is the other conclusion, is, you know, if you ever see things in the automotive industry where players who shouldn't be playing together are in bed together, and, you know, the example there is the now looking like it's falling apart Honda, Nissan, Mitsubishi merger, it's because shit's going down, right? And what we recorded was, you know, the moral of the story is, if the plane's going down, just start an orgy, because it results in, you know, triplets. But we have to cut that
because some planes have gone down.
Right after we recorded it, we had 2 major plane wrecks. And I'm like, okay, sorry, I'm not referencing that. But really, you see this sort of consolidation. The plane's going down. We got to land it softly. Just have everyone be in, as many people in that plane as possible to help soften the landing. And we see that with Stellantis, and, you know, which is 73 different brands, and all, you know, the auto industry is in a very clear period of consolidation right now, which is exactly where we were at the end of the Malaise era, and which was the last time the industry was this much trouble. And, you know, these days you have a Honda Prologue and a Chevy Blazer are the same car. Like, I don't think... Oops.
Really?
Yeah. The Honda Prologue is a Chevy. You know, you walk
From
into...
Honda?
Yeah. Yeah.
What? God, this is why I don't pay attention to new cars. What on earth?
I mean, you walk into a Toyota dealership and you can buy a Subaru or a BMW or Mazda last year, right? So, you know, the IQ, the Mazda 2 was sold as a Scion IQ. No, not IQ, IA, which was a Mazda, which is 100% a Mazda. And then you have the BRZ sold as a Toyota GR86, and you have the Supra sold. I mean, this is ridiculous. You know, you should not be able to walk into the dealership of one car company and buy 3 different other car companies' products.
Is it always bad though? Like Dodge Colt and like Mitsubishi Mirage, and I'm talking about like in the 80s, or Ram together. Charger, or
those companies were in bed together and had partial ownership. So you have this, you know, even you have the Diamond Star cars that you had the Mitsubishi Chrysler Conquest and Mitsubishi Starion, for example. But, you know, Mitsubishi does a Starion. Chrysler invests heavily, makes their own version of that car, but then makes a bunch of changes that benefit everyone. That's kind of a different story than a badge job.
Okay.
And so, you know, Mazda Navajo versus Ford Explorer, that was a badge job.
Yes,
I just don't think that benefits anyone.
Yeah.
Isuzu Trooper and Acura SVX. Come on. SLX, I'm sorry. There's just certain things this is a head scratcher and it's not benefiting your brand, and all you're doing is exposing yourself to the weaknesses of other companies. Volkswagen Rutan.
Yeah.
Do you think that sold any other Volkswagens? Do you think that helped Volkswagen a lot, or just gave, VW dealers a Chrysler minivan to sell with a Volkswagen badge on it and warranty issues that they didn't know how to fix? So I just see this consolidation thing as not really a good idea, but sometimes necessary to sort of slow the descent of an industry that's in decline or in really big turbulence. Right
Is
now,
Honda in that much trouble?
I don't think Honda's Honda's certainly not in as much trouble as Nissan is.
Yeah, so why would you tie yourself?
So historically, I'm going to say, without being a numbers person, over the last 20 years, Accord has been in the running for the top 3 spot of cars sold. It's sort of like Camry, Accord, Civic, Corolla as the sort of passenger car number 1 bestsellers. And that's now been replaced. RAV4 has replaced Corolla, and really Camry's still in like the number 3 or 4 spot. I feel like at this point, Camry, so RAV4 selling 415 or 420,000 units, something like that. Camry used to be in their high 3s. Camry is now in the high 2s, and Accord is in the low 1s, 130,000 units. I don't remember where Civic is, but it's not anywhere where it used to be.
Is that a result of their products?
I think it's their product. And CRV is okay, but it's nowhere near RAV4. And I just think Honda has, Civic sales are down, I think 30% year over year from 24 back to 23. It's just, Accord sales, if I said Civic, it's just not working. Something's wrong. And Acura is certainly in death spiral at this point. Like, I don't even know why that division still exists. Whereas Lexus, I get it. I see it's viable. Revolves a lot around the dealership experience, but a Lexus customer is a Lexus customer. They're not looking at anything else. And they make a lot of compelling products where Acura doesn't. So I do see Honda in trouble. Not in
Nissan Mitsubishi trouble,
No.
which is just tying 2 rocks together to see if they'll float.
Yeah. And that's what they all do. But sometimes, to the point of the Tipo Quattro cars, you tie a bunch of rocks together and up to the surface floats a couple cool cars that we can now own. And,
Sure.
They sold 503,000, 500 and something thousand 9,000s, none of which are of interest to us as enthusiasts, except the fast ones. And they sold 400 and something thousand Chromas. No one cares. They sold 289 or whatever it was, 1,000 Temas, of which 3 or 4 or 5,000 are interest because they have a Ferrari V8 in them. So as the regular shit just sort of goes away, we're left with a couple of cool enthusiast cars. And I parked all 3 right there, was a sight.
Yeah.
That was just so cool. And I like that. I like being able to say, well, these cars killed their respective car companies, but look at them. They're fucking cool.
Yeah. A lot of childhood desire for me wrapped up in those cars.
Yeah. Cool stuff. Genuinely cool stuff. So
all right.
Well, that is the Tipo Quattro.
Joining us for this episode of the Carmudgeon Show. We may see you next week. We may not.
Who can say?